the largest naval battle in human history, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. In 1944, the U.S. Pacific Fleet launched continuous offensives against the Japanese Navy. The aim was to cut off the Japanese supply lines in the Pacific. The U.S. Navy's first strategic target was Leyte Island in the Philippines. The Philippines is located in the Southeast Asia region. Leyte Gulf was a strategic location for Japan to transport materials back to the mainland. Therefore, the U.S. dispatched the Third Fleet, commanded by Admiral Halsey. For this operation, the Third Fleet assembled 17 aircraft carriers, 8 battleships, and more than 70 cruisers and destroyers. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral Kinkaid, commanding the landing operations, led over 700 ships of the 7th Fleet and 170,000 Marines. In October 1944, the two elite U.S. fleets set sail towards the Philippines. Faced with the U.S.'s pressing threat, the Japanese Navy decided to gather all its elite forces and head to the Philippines. To counter the Pacific Fleet's attack, the Japanese assembled 4 aircraft carriers, 9 battleships, 20 cruisers, and 34 destroyers. Commanders Admiral Ozawa and Admiral Kurita took charge of the fleet. Additionally, Japan's strongest battleship, the Yamato, also joined the fleet as the flagship. At this point, both parties were poised for battle, each determined to control the Philippines. This battle's ferocity was unprecedented and unparalleled. The Japanese, fully aware of their inferior strength, devised a meticulous plan. Plan 1 involved using Ozawa's carrier fleet as bait to draw out the main U.S. fleet. The Tai plan aimed to use the firepower of Kurita and Nishimura's battleships to launch a fierce attack on the U.S. 7th Fleet. The goal was to annihilate their landing troops in the Pacific. This plan was extremely risky. A loss could mean the end of the entire Japanese combined fleet. Due to the significant power disparity, the Japanese Navy had no choice but to fight a desperate battle. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was massive, comprising 4 separate battles. The first battle took place in the western waters of Leyte Gulf on October 23rd. U.S. submarines were the first to discover the Japanese Kurita fleet. 2 submarines immediately launched torpedoes at the fleet, sinking a battleship and heavily damaging a cruiser. At the same time, Admiral Halsey, upon receiving the news, immediately ordered the Third Fleet to attack the Kurita fleet. Over 200 aircraft took off from the aircraft carriers and launched an air raid on the Japanese fleet. By the afternoon of October 24th, after repeated bombings by U.S. planes, the combined fleet suffered heavy losses. 2 battleships, a cruiser, and several destroyers were severely damaged, and 120 aircraft were shot down. In addition, the Musashi, a super battleship alongside the Yamato, was hit by over 20 torpedoes and several heavy bombs, eventually sinking in the Pacific. The Japanese counterattack was also fierce. The U.S. lost 18 aircraft, and the Princeton, a light aircraft carrier, and the Birmingham, a cruiser, were sunk. The first battle of the Leyte Gulf ended with a U.S. victory. However, while the Third Fleet's aircraft carriers were bombing the Kurita fleet, on the morning of October 24th, Ozawa's carrier fleet, responsible for luring the enemy, openly transmitted their action plans, which were intercepted by the U.S. Halsey fell for the trap, believing that the Japanese main fleet had been almost completely destroyed and that Kinkaid's 7th Fleet was safe. Consequently, the Third Fleet disengaged from the 7th Fleet and headed towards Ozawa's fleet. Commander Kinkaid of the 7th Fleet also received the news that the Third Fleet was attacking the Japanese aircraft carriers. Kinkaid then realized that the real target of the Japanese might be his 7th Fleet. In the Surigao Strait, Kinkaid arranged 6 battleships, 8 cruisers, and more than 30 destroyers and torpedo boats, forming 3 naval defense lines. On the night of October 24th, the Japanese Nishimura fleet quietly sailed into the Surigao Strait. The 7th Fleet's first line of defense was the first to spot them. This took the Japanese by surprise, as they did not expect the U.S. fleet to be prepared. At the same time, all U.S. battleships launched a fierce attack on the Nishimura fleet, catching them off guard and inflicting heavy losses. In the end, only one destroyer managed to escape the battlefield with heavy smoke, while the rest of the Japanese fleet was nearly annihilated. On the other side, the U.S. Third Fleet pursuing Ozawa's fleet discovered the Japanese aircraft carrier battle group at 1600 hours on October 24th. Halsey immediately ordered the fleet to pursue. A peak confrontation between aircraft carriers was about to unfold. The two sides engaged in a fierce battle in the northern waters of Leyte Gulf. At 7 o'clock on October 25th, over 200 U.S. aircraft swooped down on Ozawa's fleet. Japanese Zero fighters took off to intercept, but during the Battle of Midway, Japan had lost many excellent pilots. At this time, almost all Japanese pilots were novices. In terms of both aircraft performance and pilot quality, they were far inferior to the U.S. In a short time, 18 Japanese aircraft were shot down. The aircraft carrier Chiyoda was sunk. Japanese escort fighters were almost entirely shot down. The 4 aircraft carriers became sitting ducks, only able to rely on anti-aircraft fire to counterattack the U.S. By noon, the aircraft carrier Zuikaku was sunk. Chiyoda was heavily damaged. At 1300 hours, the last Japanese aircraft carrier, Zuho, was also sunk under the relentless bombardment of the U.S. That evening, the U.S. caught up with the damaged Chiyoda and sank it. Thus, all of Ozawa's aircraft carriers were annihilated. On that day, the U.S. deployed over 500 sorties of aircraft. With the minor loss of 20 aircraft, they annihilated all 4 of Ozawa's aircraft carriers. This was a significant victory. More importantly, these Japanese aircraft carriers had participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor. This time, the Americans finally avenged that attack. However, the 7th Fleet preparing to land at Leyte Gulf was in a dire situation. The previously repelled Kurita fleet returned to Leyte Gulf. In the waters of Samar Island, it encountered the 7th Fleet again, facing the Kurita fleet with super battleships like the Yamato and the Kongo. The Americans were at a disadvantage. Therefore, they could only call for help from the 3rd Fleet. The Japanese battleships immediately launched a fierce attack on the 7th Fleet. They even deployed kamikaze suicide squads to charge at the U.S. warships. The 7th Fleet suffered heavy losses. At this time, Halsey was leading the aircraft carrier fleet to reinforce them. However, Japanese Commander Kurita, believing that Ozawa's carrier fleet had been annihilated, thought the Pacific situation was extremely unfavorable for Japan. Therefore, he ordered his troops to retreat. Thus, the largest naval battle in history came to a close. In this battle, the Japanese Navy lost 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 9 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. Over 10,000 personnel were killed or wounded. In contrast, the U.S. lost only 1 light aircraft carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 1 escort ship, and 1 submarine. The number of casualties was over 1,100. Through this battle, the U.S. Navy thoroughly defeated the Japanese combined fleet.